Apartheid was a political and social system used in South Africa which lasted from the 1940s to the 1990s. Under this system, the people of South Africa were separated by their race and forced to live apart. Apartheid led to many uprisings against the government and eventually led to violence. It was only until the people united and fought together against the government for equality when apartheid was finally abolished. Beginning in the 17th century, European settlers arrived in South Africa in order to develop trading posts and capitalize on the newfound gold and diamonds. During the urbanization of the European settlers, many indigenous South Africans were displaced and treated poorly. Eventually, the British took over and began their plan of apartheid. As a part of this process, townships were created. Townships were underdeveloped, racially segregated urban areas. These towns were reserved for all of the colored people living in South Africa. The government of South Africa created many legislative acts that restricted and controlled the lives of the colored people. A couple of these documents were the Group Areas Act and the Population Registration Act. The Group Areas Act focused more on the demographics, while the Population Registration Act sorted people into the racial classes. There were many problems with the townships. The towns were poorly constructed and lacked many amenities. The education system inside the townships were also very poor. Townships were the beginnings of oppositions towards apartheid. As tensions increased, the Defiance Campaign began. The Defiance Campaign was a united movement against the policies of apartheid. The goals of the campaign was to unify all of the races and draw attention to the issues. Some of the actions taken by the people were freedom songs, protests, and marches. Many of the Defiance Campaign supporters were arrested and suffered short-term imprisonment. The leader of the anti-apartheid movements was Nelson Mandela, who was part of the ANC, or African National Congress. Mandela was inspired by Gandhi, and he believed in peaceful protests. However, when he saw that peaceful protests were not working, he decided to turn to violent means of protesting. On March 21, 1960, a large group of South Africans initiated a march in Sharpeville, in which they left their passbooks at home and gathered at a police station to protest against the National Party. As the march escalated, the police felt threatened and began to fire shots into the crowd. This is known as the Sharpeville Massacre, which resulted in 69 deaths and 180 wounded people. The Sharpeville Massacre was an important turning point for the African National Congress, as they decided to turn to violent means of protesting rather than the peaceful protesting they once practiced. Due to the increase in protests by the African National Congress, the group was banned by the government. Many of the ANC leaders were arrested, including Nelson Mandela. The trials ended in 8 of the leaders receiving a sentence of imprisonment for life. Eventually, their terms were ended when Mandela negotiated with the government after 27 years of imprisonment. In turn for his freedom and elimination of apartheid, Nelson Mandela would call off the violent protests of the ANC and create peace.